Hello and welcome to the Eye of Gnosis Tarot. My name is Ewan and today we are looking at the Nine of Swords as we continue on our series looking at the Suit of Swords in the Thoth Tarot deck. Now if you haven't already, I highly recommend going back and looking at the playlist for the Suit of Swords, as it will give much more context to this card. And if you have the time and you are very interested in tarot in general, I highly recommend going back and looking at my playlists for the Suit of Wands and also the Suit of Cups, as they will give even greater context to the Suit of Swords, and in particular the numbers of each of the Minor Arcana as they are known. Now if you want to look at the Divinatory Interpretations, I have put a timestamp below. As always, however, I recommend watching the whole video at least once so you have much greater understanding of why this card has such divinatory interpretations. But without further ado, we will look at the Nine of Swords, known as Cruelty. So when we look at the card, we see these 9 jagged rapiers pointing downwards, their blades dripping with blood, whilst we see poison raining from above in between each of these swords. We see the pinwheels that are featured in the previous sword cards in the background, and they seem to have a colour of old rust, and they've become rather erratic, these pinwheels, as they are falling to this dark bottom of the card. Above we see the sigil of Mars, whilst below in the darkness, and we can barely see it, we see the sigil of Gemini. So the Nine of Swords, like all 9 cards, belongs to the Sephiroth of Yesod. And as we've seen Yesod in previous suits, it tends to be a very positive Sephiroth. So in the Nine of Wands it was strength, and in the Nine of Cups it was happiness. However, here in the realm of Yetzirah, which is the Suit of Swords, we are introduced to a foul combination. You see, if you remember in our video on the Nine of Wands, Yesod is an endless Sephiroth. And in the Suit of Swords, we see the concept of endless thoughts expressed within the Sephiroth. And if there was ever a true definition of cruelty, it would be endless thoughts. In this card, our overthinking and analysing has led to a breaking point. We are not only caught between options and opinions, as we are in Hod, in the Eight of Swords, which was interference, but we are actively attacking ourselves in the Nine of Swords for our indecision and our poor choices. Yet this mental violence only adds more thoughts to the battle in our minds, and thus more blood is drawn by their sharp edges. In the Nine of Swords, we see the concept of a death by many cuts, but not yet 1,000. We are still cognitively aware enough to function as a human being, but not as a healthy and thriving individual. Fear rules, and self-criticism and paranoia have become self-attacking and schizophrenia. We are jumping at our own shadows and cutting ourselves off from the world due to our hate and our shame of it, and ourselves. Furthermore, in an attempt to ease our endless thoughts, we have created coping schemas that can become just as torturous. Mental illness is soon to follow suit, and in whatever way it may manifest, they are all disparate and desperate attempts of the mind to control and bring order to a painful existence. Yet these strategies must also become endless if they are to remedy our seemingly endless mental malady, and thus a new hell is created to supplement the first, instead of ending it. It is as if whatever we do, we only make matters worse for ourselves and others, creating further guilt and shame, which the inner critic within all of us is more than happy to capitalise on. And in a sense, this is the mind attempting to try and halt suffering forever. As the Buddha wisely observed, suffering is eternal and it's something we cannot escape from. We can only approach it differently. A slightly different but related aspect to this card is that of revenge. In this sense, an endless expansion of hate only leads to further ideas of who to punish and how we shall punish them for whatever injustice they dealt upon us. Such a mindset can become so absorbed in vengeance that it consumes the whole identity of the ego, leaving it as a poisoned and hollow shell of its former self, with no respite, even after its revenge is complete. Crowley tells us that the only way to get out of this situation is to practice passive resistance, and to change our mindset towards the problem, that being not to make it a problem in the first place. In this sense, our redemption lies in stepping out of the infamous drama triangle, and choosing to be neither a victim, prosecutor, or rescuer within this triangle. Instead, we can choose to be the detached observer, and eventually we shall see that suffering is self-perpetuated and will dissipate when not given fuel to burn in the form of our thoughts. This is the concept of mindfulness as practiced in Vedic and Buddhist traditions. So now we're going to look at the symbolism for the Nine of Swords. So the most striking image in this card are the 9 swords we see here facing downwards, and they are a type of sword known as a rapier. Rapiers are thrusting weapons, and here we see they are jagged and rusted due to their constant exposure to battle and blood. You can see there's chinks here in each of the swords, and you get a much better appreciation of these swords if you look at your own card if you have the Thoth deck. These are not weapons that will deliver a clean and clear wound as originally intended, but instead they've become blades that will snag on entry and exit, creating torn fissures of flesh ripe for infection. Thus, the quality of the thoughts in this card and their impact are clearly expressed in this visceral image. Furthermore, if we look at the hilts of the swords, we will see that they have scorpion stings on them, hinting towards the sometimes cruel and poisonous nature of an ill-dignified Scorpio. And this is a zodiac sign ruled by Mars, which tops the top of the card. The position of the swords is also poignant, as they suggest a terrible dread hanging over us, much like the traditional Nine of Swords image in the Rider-Waite deck. And we see that they are waiting to fall at any moment, and end us painfully and without finesse. The blood we see dripping from the rapiers is a clear symbol of the pain and wounds dealt by the self-hate and vengeance inherent in the card. There are 26 blood droplets, representing the atomic number of iron, which allows us to carry oxygen in our blood and is also the metal associated with Mars. The poison drops, which we can see as the sort of green, white, beige drops in between each sword, further imply that the concepts associated with this card are tainted and will infect the mind, causing further pain and anguish. The red colour of the swords and the rust-coloured background not only imply cruelty and taint, but are also further representations of the Mars influence in this card. Mars is an extremely masculine energy, bent on the concept of doing at whatever cost. Meanwhile, when we look down here at the bottom, Gemini is a very cerebral sign, constantly caught in its thoughts and streams of information. Now, in the Nine of Swords, it is as if Mars has created a terrible and cruel tyranny over the twins of Gemini, forcing them to think without reason or choice. In their despair, the twins desperately try to create solutions to their dilemma, but neither of them can agree on the best course of action, and or only make the situation worse in this hurried and terrified state of mind. Wisdom has long gone out of the window, and in a bitter twist of irony, the very attempt to gain control over this terrible situation has led to it spiralling out of control. Meanwhile, in the background, we see these broken and fallen pinwheels demonstrating the collapse of effective cognitive function. The mind is no longer the well-oiled machine we saw in the 2 and 6 of Swords. Now it has become a rusted scrap heap of failure and shame. So, after looking at that symbolism in the Nine of Swords, we're going to look at the divinatory interpretations of the card. Now, in divination, the Nine of Swords is an incredibly difficult card to work with. When well dignified, it can represent passive resistance, maturity from hardship, facing our fears, realising the truth of a matter, and breaking through inner turmoil. However, when it is ill-dignified, the card represents pain, cruelty, vengeance, hate, self-criticism, shame, mental illness, suffering, and despair. The key concept here is mental suffering and being lost in the cruelty of our own thoughts. It is, as Crowley puts it, thought has gone through every possible stage, and the conclusion is despair. And we shall see this conclusion in the next card, the 10 of Swords, which is known as Ruin, in the next video. But for now, this has been the Eye of Gnosis Tarot. Please do hit the like button if you like what you saw here today, and consider hitting the subscriber button and the bell icon so you don't miss any future videos about the Thoth Tarot. Now, I also do tarot readings. They are a bit few and far between due to the nature of my job, but when I do them, I do highly recommend giving them a watch, as they are very in-depth, using the Thoth deck and the knowledge I have of this deck. Thank you very much for joining me today, and I hope you have a wonderful morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are in the world, and goodbye.